Hello everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and today we're going to learn how to make Flappy Bird. Flappy Bird is a very simple game to play, and actually kind of simple to make. But I wanted to do this tutorial because it allows us to get into a little bit of animation. Animations are really important. So far, the two games we've made in Unity have not required any animation whatsoever, and so in this game I want to show you some animation practices. Just a very simple animation introduction, and then we can get into more advanced stuff in the next couple of videos or in the next couple of games that we make. All right, so I'm going to make a new project. Make sure that it's 2D. I'm going to call it Flappy Turkey. Right? I don't know, just whatever. I just have a couple of Flappy Birds in here, so I don't want to name it something different. So I'm going to put my Flappy Bird stuff on. Let's put it in, yeah, you want to put it in your, so I'll just put that in there. Yeah, 2D, everything looks good there. I'm going to create my project. And it's going to take a minute for it to actually build. So in the meantime, let's kind of talk about what Flappy Bird is, right? Let's think about the way the game works. We can actually let's bring that over. Oh. Let's take a look. Let's find some Flappy Bird on here. Hey, look, there's Flappy Bird IO. We can play a little bit of it here. So basically the way the game works is you have this bird, and if you click the mouse button, if you click the mouse button, he goes up, and if you hit one of these obstacles, you die, and apparently I'm not very good at it, but that's okay. All right, so we have our Flappy Bird project built, ready to go. First thing I want to do is I want to make sure the main camera is configured. Now normally we would put it to black, but in this case we want a nice light blue. So actually what works best is a red value of 198, a green value of 208, and a blue value of 230. So that makes a nice looking blue. And then let's go ahead and set the camera size to 10, make it a little bigger. Okay, perfect. All right, now we need the sky. We need the background. So I'm going to go ahead and import the sky package, which actually, if I go to my desktop, and I'll actually go to my assets, sprites. I'm going to bring in all of my stuff from the other project that I was working on. All right, so background, bird, ground, obstacle. I'm going to bring this background in. When I click on it, I have my import settings over here. And the import settings I want to use for this background object. Remember, we were doing 1 pixel per unit last time. This time we want to do 16 pixels per unit. What that means is that basically 16 by 16 pixels will fit into one grid in our game world, right? And one of these little grid dots. 16 by 16 pixels. So I'm going to do 16 pixels, and I'm going to also keep the filter to no filter. Hit apply. Okay. Now, instead of dragging this directly into my game, like we would normally do, I actually want the background to stay where the camera is. I want the background to be a child of the camera. Basically, so child and parent relationships. The main camera is always in my game, right? Because if we don't have a camera, we can't see what we're looking at. We can't see the game. So the main camera is always in my game. If I make the background a child of the main camera, then it means all of the properties of the main camera, its position, its size, everything, get applied also to the background. So I'm going to just drop it right on top of main camera. And notice how the main camera and the background's indented under the main camera, and there's a little arrow, and I can hide it, right? So that's what child-parent relationships mean. Alrighty. Now I want to make sure that the I want to make sure that the background is a little bit back from, or a little bit down here. Let's go down -1. And I actually want to shrink the camera down because now that I'm looking at it, the camera, yeah, the camera's a little bit too big. So let's go 5 maybe? No. Let's do 8. Should we do 8? 8 might be good. And then actually I want to move the camera back up, or the background up a little bit more. Actually, I'll just put it right back to 0. And then we'll play around with it when we get the ground in there. All right, so I have my background in there. Alrighty. So, another thing I want to do with my background is I want to make sure its order in layer is -1 because I want to make sure that my background won't interfere with any of the other objects in my game. That's very important. All right, so let's bring in the ground as well. So again, 16 pixels per unit, and turn off the filter and hit apply. And now, instead of making this a parent of the camera like we could, it'll actually look weird because the ground won't look like the ground's moving, and it should. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the ground, and we're going to kind of just try to line it up a little bit here. Now again, if you notice here, the ground is on the same level as the main camera. We don't want it indented, because if it was indented, it would mean it was the parent, or it was a child of the main camera, which is not what we want. Alrighty, and yeah, let's get a little bit more precise with this position. 16 by -6. And actually we will move our background down just a little bit more. -1. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Now here's a problem that we're going to run into. Our bird is going to be moving along here as it goes, right? Now if you notice, our ground runs out of ground, essentially, right? And we could write a script that will procedurally give us new ground every time if we want to make this just go over and over again. But I'm kind of thinking about maybe this Flappy Bird game is a game with different levels, and there's a definite endpoint to each level. So with this level, this could be like a tutorial level where there's only one ground section. But if we want another one, we can just drop it right out and kind of make sure that everything's lined up properly so we don't get any weird graphical glitches. But we can just drop it out and put it right where we want it to go. So, just kind of line it up. And it's probably best to do it here. 80 and -6. Now everything's perfectly lined up. You can't even tell there's a seam there. And now we have double the size of the level. So we can go from here all the way to the end, and then once he hits the end, then the level's over. It doesn't have to be exactly like Angry Bird, but that's just going to save us some scripting in the long run. Alrighty. Now with the ground, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the ground is set to order in layer 1. I want to make sure the ground has a order in layer of 1. That's going to make sure it stays on top of the background. And all right, now we need to talk about physics. So with the ground, we need to have a box collider, obviously. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to delete that second ground piece because I'm making more changes. So we need a box collider 2D because we need to check to see when our bird collides with the box collider, right? But here's the problem. So later on, we're going to create obstacles, and those obstacles are going to go up and down, and they're going to go kind of through the ground plane. And we don't want, and those have to have box colliders on them as well, because those obstacles are going to be, they're going to be a failure point as well. So if our bird hits the obstacle, then the game's over. So we want to make sure that the ground objects and the obstacle objects do not collide with each other, right? So there's a really easy way we can do this. Up here where it says layer, we have default layer, and then we have a bunch of default or a bunch of layers that Unity provides for us. I want to add a new layer, and so I just add a new layer. You go down here to layer 8, and we're going to call this, let's call it weird physics. So weird physics, okay? And this is just going to allow us to turn off physics collisions for anything in the weird physics layer. So then we'll go back to the ground, and we will choose that weird physics layer. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we turn off the collisions for weird physics. So if we go to Edit, we go to Project Settings, and we have Physics 2D right here. Over here we have this menu that looks kind of confusing at first, but it's really not. So here we can change all the physics settings for the game environment itself. Here we can set our gravity. So for example, the gravity here is applied to our Y axis, and it's negative 9.8. So that's the default gravity for the whole game environment. We can actually change the gravity here. The X gravity is 0, meaning it doesn't pull you left or right. We can change the default material. We can do all kinds of stuff here. There are plenty of things here that we can change. What we want to look at down here is our layer collision matrix. This basically says which layer is allowed to collide with the other layers, right? And so we have our new weird physics layer that we created here. So we have weird physics, and we also have weird physics down here. Right here, this checkbox means that weird physics will collide with objects in weird physics. All we have to do is uncheck that, and now anything that's on the weird physics layer won't actually collide with anything else on the weird physics layer. Meaning we can have our obstacles moving through the ground plane without worrying about colliding with it and causing some weird stuff in our game. So that's pretty easy. I mean, this isn't something you're going to play with too much, but I just want you to see that it's here and see that you have some options that you can play around with. You can change the physics of the game environment itself. All right, so let's go ahead and click play just to make sure our game looks good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So we have our camera background, we have our background object, and then we have our ground plane here. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with that right now. Let's see. Let's go ahead and bring in our bird image, and then in the next video, actually, I'll save that for the next video. I'll cut this one short. This is all pretty easy stuff, pretty new stuff. The one new thing that we added was this physics layer here. Go ahead and play around with that. I'm going to add another ground. Just going to duplicate, and instead of 16, I'll move that over 60. Did I just perfectly move that? Oh my gosh, I'm a genius. I should quit this video now, as I will. Oh, I didn't move it over. Never mind, I'm not a genius. 80 it was, not 60. Anyway, so in the next video, we're going to bring in the bird. We are going to deal with animation. I'm going to teach you about the animator and the animation controller. For this one, it's going to be pretty easy, but we're going to get into that. And then after that, we will start programming this thing so that it actually works properly. So, all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you paying attention, and I will see you next time.